Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Joe and welcome to a brand new video, and today is something kind of different, right? So for those of you who don't know, Overwatch or Blizzard announced Overwatch 2 with a gameplay trailer. This came out 9 hours ago and it's got over 1.1 million views on YouTube already, and it sparked quite a bit of controversy. Overwatch 2 is essentially a whole new game featuring what I assume to be the old Overwatch characters, maybe mixed in with a few new ones, taking on evil robots, trying to destroy them and the world, right? There's new loot, story missions, things like that, and a lot of people have been saying that Blizzard have copied Valve's Man vs Machine mode, and there's a stupid amount of similarities, and I think the main source of this is because obviously when Overwatch initially came out, because it was a class-based shooter, everyone sort of just jumped to the conclusion that it was copying Team Fortress 2, and that's why it sort of Overwatch and TF2 were almost seen as like villains to each other, because they're both class-based shooters and a lot of TF2 pros left to play Overwatch. So TF2 community have always had a sort of bad taste in their mouth regarding Overwatch. So is there a sort of bias coming in the comparison between TF2 and Overwatch? Now, I played about 10 or so hours at most of Overwatch, right? I wasn't very good at it, but I seem to enjoy the cool game, and Delphi recently released a video, so shout out to Delphi for pointing out the comparisons that we're going to be looking at. His video will be linked down below, but we're going to be looking at the comparisons and discussing if Blizzard actually copied Valve's Man vs Machine, because let's take into account that Valve's Man vs Machine mode in Team Fortress 2 isn't the only sort of survival against AI robots or zombies type mode in games. There's thousands of other games probably out there that follow a very similar premise, so we're definitely going to have to keep that in mind. But yeah, we're going to be taking a look at the comparisons now and discussing it.
No sector is everywhere. I'll hold them as long as I can.
So this is the first comparison made, in that the main enemies that come in waves in both games are dropped off in a ship, and whilst this is a glaringly obvious comparison, I want to say that it's not overly unnatural to see something like this, particularly in a survival type game. I remember distinctly playing Halo Reach when I was sort of growing up, and there was a survival mode in that where the enemies would be dropped off in a big ship. And funnily enough, in the Halo Reach trailer from E3 2010 for the firefight mode, there is a short scene where we can see the enemies jumping out of a big spaceship. So whilst this is a comparison that can be made, there are multiple other games that have this. It's quite a generic entrance for enemies in survival-based games. I don't necessarily think we can grasp at straws and say Blizzard copied this directly from MVM, when plenty of other games use it.
It's happening again.
Whilst this is pretty similar, again, I don't think a comparison can be drawn because of the fact that how else are they meant to introduce robots, you know? TF2 shows the robots turning on and sort of booting up. Overwatch took a different approach and showed the core assembly of the robots themselves. So it's a little bit different in that regard, but how else are you meant to portray the enemies? Obviously, they're a large part of these games. How else are you supposed to present robots, you know? Like, you want to portray the enemy, what they are, how they're made, to the audience in a short gameplay trailer, and when the enemy is literally a robot, you're incredibly restricted on doing so. So again, I don't think that's a direct copy at all.
You're with me. We're getting aboard that ship.
I promise this video isn't a lengthy compilation of me saying that these things aren't the same, but once again, these things aren't the same. There are a few things that I think are the same that we will get into, and I'm actively leaving things out that I don't think are the same, but I mean, these scenes aren't similar in the slightest. There are minimal robots in Overwatch's scene. We can barely see the robots, and we see the players powering through and destroying them easily. TF2's scene, however, using the backwards camera, portrays many more robots in comparison to the small amount of TF2 mercs who look severely outnumbered and look like they're going to be struggling. Blizzard wanted to set the theme that, you know, you can power through the robots and complete the missions. TF2 wanted to give off the theme of survival and impending doom. These things can't be compared, and they give off two completely different vibes.
Get the civilians to the ship!
You got it! What was that?
See, I told you guys, this isn't just a compilation of me saying they weren't the same. This I can agree that there's definitely some form of inspiration took in some form or another. Whether it's the core concept of having a large enemy that's much harder to disable than the other enemies, that's up for debate, because many other games, I'm going to bring it back to Halo, I know for a fact that Halo had larger enemies, almost like Juggernaut style enemies that were hard to take, and I don't think it's an uncommon feature in survival games to have one larger enemy that's much harder to take out. But I think the way that they portrayed the giant, and even the sound effect they used, is incredibly similar. Let me play them over for you guys. Like, that low pitch noise is very, very similar. You can't argue that those noises aren't incredibly similar. And also, just the whole premise of this scene is incredibly similar from Overwatch to Team Fortress 2. The camera angles of the mercenary, there's multiple in the TF2 trailer, but only one in Overwatch, looking up portrays how large these robots are in comparison to a normal human. The fact that not much is seen of the robot, you can only see it from an over-the-shoulder shot in TF2, but we can see it a little bit more in Overwatch, but just that way it's portrayed of the mercenary or character being shocked looking up at the big robot is incredibly similar. Whilst these are pretty similar, I don't think it's a misconception that, most survival games have some sort of upgrade system. The idea of survival games is that the enemies get progressively harder, so you're gonna need upgrades. It's the concept of things like zombies in the Call of Duty franchise, and just as far back as survival games go, there's some sort of upgrade system in place to where it makes it easier to deal with the higher increased difficulty of the enemies. So whilst the concept of buying upgrades is pretty similar, I don't think you can say that Overwatch copied Team Fortress 2, as it's pretty imperative to have this, otherwise you'd just be playing the same wave with the same level enemies over and over again. So in conclusion, I think it's a very, very large coincidence that the main game Team Fortress 2 was seen to rival bring out a second release of their game which is incredibly similar in concept to Team Fortress 2's other main mode. But I do think that the fact that Overwatch is Team Fortress 2's sort of rival or very similar game is definitely almost playing a part in people seeing the similarities. You know, if this Overwatch trailer released and it was some random game, like just coming out at E3 that had no affiliation to Overwatch or class-based shooters as a whole, people would not bat an eyelid in drawing comparisons to Man vs Machine, as it would just look like a generic zombie/robot survival game. It's actually crazy that if you go to Twitter and search like Overwatch 2 TF2 or Overwatch 2 Man vs Machine, there is just a flood of tweets, you know. It's all over my timeline. Obviously I have a TF2 related audience and follow TF2 related people, but all the comparisons I saw was that it was like a $60 variant of Man vs Machine. However, on the other side of the spectrum, we had tweets like this, and it really does put it into comparison that as soon as something slips up with Overwatch, the TF2 fans will jump on that. And if there's an opportunity to say Overwatch is copying TF2 again, the TF2 fans will jump on that. There was a few really funny tweets that I saw though, like someone said, "I'm still stunned that Overwatch pretty much took Man vs Machine, slapped a $60 price tag on it and called it a new game." And someone actually replied to Overwatch's announcing tweet with, "Did you mean a $60 DLC that's just Man vs Machine?" And obviously r/TF2 took this and ran with it. I mean, it's r/TF2, it's not exactly the least toxic place on the planet, but they just essentially drew all the comparisons that I showed and more. And when comments like this start popping up on the Reddit, it just reinforces my point that, do you think this guy sits here watching E3 and as soon as a robot pops up on the screen, he jumps out of his seat because he thinks it's copying Man vs Machine? Like, it's purely because it's Overwatch that people are so ready to throw fuel onto the fire, and they're so ready to say they're copying TF2 again, Overwatch bad, TF2 good. Like, I don't know, man, it just feels like the TF2 community is so desperate to be like the superior class-based shooter that anytime there's a chance to put down Overwatch, they'll jump on it, you know. The TF2 community is so desperate to be better than Overwatch. That's just how it seems from me, man, and I'm in the TF2 community. But yeah, guys, let me know what you think of this whole debate down below. I mean, the main thing that wanted me to talk about this was just seeing how biased everyone was when comparing the two things. And whilst they are incredibly similar, I don't think that it's a straight comparison or a straight copy of ideas from Blizzard to Valve. So if you guys agree or disagree, let me know down in the comments below. I clocked it, not writing sonnets, keep it close to my heart like a locket, never dishonest. High up in the stars just like a comet, I get that profit, then I do the dash just like I'm Sonic.
I'm dashing out the blue so they can call me supersonic, but my eyes been super red cause we've been smoking super chronic. Got the flavors in the bag, you would think that I'm a florist, and I know that makes you mad.